Joe, mate, welcome to Forest Lodge. It's good to have you here.
Good to see you, mate.
Massive compliments to you for all the hard work you've been doing travelling around Southland during those storms to make sure everyone's doing okay. Well
Yeah,
done.
cheers. It's been a big few days with yourself, actually. Unprecedented storm that's had created an unprecedented level of damage. And we've learned a lot, and we're going to learn a lot more, I think, just about the importance of the electricity system. But also how vulnerable it is, and how everything else cascades out, from the communication systems to water supply, food generation.
Totally. We've got to start doing what's in the best interest of our people. And when you have something like a storm just take out all the power lines, take out all the communications, it makes it pretty hard to live, and especially when it takes days and days to restore that power. Like the one thing I talk about, there's resilience and there's survival. And survival is blankets and candles and a gas cylinder for your barbecue. And there's resilience, which is how do you live a reasonably good lifestyle, maybe running in third gear rather than fifth gear while we wait for all these things to be fixed up. And then of course there's just every day, business as usual, which is fifth gear, which is when the power lines haven't all fallen down.
Yeah, well, totally. And I mean, an interesting thing that we've learned from this is just how difficult it is to get information, both for people affected, but also people who are trying to help those people affected, because when the electricity system goes down, and with that the communication system, it can take quite a while for it to actually get those information out and information in, so that people know what's going on at both ends of the spectrum.
Totally.
So yeah, it's been really interesting, and I thought it was interesting to have a look at what you've done here with your solar system, and we've still got snowing on the mountains. Yeah, we're heading into into summer, and it's still snowing up there just before.
I mean, the whole thing here, I think, is just the one thing that can always be guaranteed is the sun's going to come up the following day. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim that you're going to be able to run an entire dairy farm in Southland off a solar array, but what you sure as hell can do is generate energy. And a lot of this at the moment is about how do you bring the cost of energy down on farm. This is a really, really good way to do it. But secondly, if you've got some battery storage on farm as well, the sun will come up the following day, you'll recharge your batteries, you'll be able to use that overnight time. Again, it's not third gear, it's not fifth gear, it's third gear. But when it comes to things like milking cows, like yes, we've got backup diesel generators, but they can only last so long with the amount of diesel that you have on farm. This is actually the way to guarantee that this stuff keeps coming up. So it's something that I massively advocate for, because we have to start thinking about things that are actually going to benefit our people more. And if the weather events get worse and this stuff continues to happen, it's just going to suck more and more for rural New Zealand. And I just don't think it's just something that we need to all be thinking about. How do we do?
Well, it's that resilience piece, right? And that's something we're really interested in, and also how it stacks up financially. I think what's really interesting, looking at what you've done here, is just what it's cost and how it's actually reducing costs for you.
The easiest way that I can explain this is that if you put a litre of diesel through a diesel gen set, it's probably $1 a kilowatt hour. A farmer buying power from the grid might be 35-40 cents a kilowatt hour. If you generate power solar on your own shed roof or so it's a massive economic gain that can be had from doing this. And that's why I call it free resilience, because kind of what you're doing is you're doing this for an economic reason, but then by installing a few batteries on the farm as well, actually it becomes the massive resilience play as well. And it doesn't actually cost you anything, because this thing pays for itself pretty quickly with the energy savings. So that's kind of what I've been trying to impart on farmers.
Can you talk us through a little bit in terms of energy savings? An example.
Just
what you've seen personally.
Yeah, what I've seen personally, like these panels here, we've got 120 kilowatts in the field here. Cost us about $120,000 to install it, so $1,000 a kilowatt. These panels will make about $28,000 a year in electricity at current wholesale rates. So you can see the payback on that is actually really, really significant. That $28,000 is if I sell that all back to other New Zealanders on the wholesale market. In actual fact, because we run a lot of electric machines here on farm, actually what I do is I avoid buying power at say 30-35 cents a kilowatt hour, and instead buy it from my own solar panels at 7 cents a kilowatt hour. And so there's a remarkable savings opportunity there as well. We're seeing especially in dairy, so much of this innovation is happening in the dairy sector at the moment, because irrigation pivots are really energy intensive. People's power bills are going up. Dairy sheds are obviously really intensive. People's power bills are going up, and this sort of stuff it might not run the full dairy shed necessarily. I mean, you can build it so it does, but actually what it does is it brings down your per unit cost of electricity. You know, and like you might still need to buy some from the grid, or you might still need a diesel backup generator, or whatever it might be to run your business and give yourself that security. But it brings the cost of energy down significantly. And you know, the farmers that we've seen down south that have done this, they're sitting there going, "Shit, I can provide my community with warm showers when the power's been out for weeks." You know, so that, I think there's a really exciting opportunity on how we can move forward. I'd love to see the point where, you know, the resilience that we have on farms, so people can still milk their cows and chill their you know, with a power cut going on.
Keep their water flowing, chill their milk.
All of the things. You can
Yeah.
keep farming. You might not, again, it might be harder to farm, but you can still keep farming. I think that's just so vital to the future of New Zealand's rural sector.
So I think the effective rate of return on your installation here is a bit over 20%.
Something like that, yeah. And the thing great about it is you guys, being the politicians, can't pinch it either, because there's not really any, like, when you're saving money,
Yeah.
there's no tax on saving money, right?
True.
So I guess you tax me at the end of the day because my business becomes more profitable and you take your money back that way. But it is like it is a really, really good rate of return, far better rates of return than a lot of other different types of investments. And it's something that I'm very, very conscious that we need to be doing more and more of, and just making sure that everyday New Zealanders understand the economics of this stuff now, and understand it's $1 a kilowatt hour of diesel and it's 7 cents for a solar panel. Yes, you have to pay for 25 years worth of energy up front when you buy a solar panel, but one great thing about farmers is they get finance, they understand finance, which means actually it is cheaper to finance that solar panel than it is to continue to buy diesel, continue to buy electricity from the grid. And they can do those numbers quickly in their heads because farmers are incredibly intelligent people, and they can be like, well, actually, I can save money straight away by going to this installation rather than continuing to pay, you know, a Gentone or something like that for their energy.
So you've got, I think you've got three different solar arrays here.
Yep.
And 120,000 kilowatts.
120 kilowatts.
Sorry, 120
Yep.
20 kilowatts.
Yep.
On, was it 0.7 hectares or
This is on 0.3 hectares.
0.3 hectares?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very small.
So the way we say it at the moment is, if you put this on a hectare, you're making 100,000 a hectare. Like, there's no other form of farming comes close to that. Like cherries, high intensive cherry planting that we do, in a good year we might do 50,000 a beep a hectare.
Yeah,
You know, really solid dairy farmers in New Zealand might do 12 to 15,000 a hectare. Sheep and beef are probably down to $3,000 or $4,000 a hectare. So you get the idea of just how valuable this can be. We've got to make sure that obviously whole of farms aren't converted to solar. We need to keep farming and keep growing food for our nation as well as other nations. But this can be a really good way of lowering farm input costs and potentially providing supplementary revenue back to farmers.
And there's nothing to stop you grazing stock in between there?
No, the only reason it
It's
stops
protected.
me is my animal husbandry is just terrible. Like, you know, like I don't have.
You're a cherry farmer.
I'm a cherry
Yeah,
farmer,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But you know, when I've seen Blair Drysdale, he grazes sheep under his panels. Emma Crutchley over in the Manitoto, she's grazing sheep under her panels. Beck Smith is grazing sheep under her panels. Like, there isn't actually a reason that this becomes less productive. If anything, like we've seen in the Manitoto, which is a really, really harsh condition, that actually grass is growing better under the panels than not under the panels. You can see what we've done here. Looks at it. That line there is basically been mowed to death because I don't want the grass growing up above the
Above
panels, right?
Yeah, right.
But in most, sorry, what's that? Just unspool it. Yeah, so we've done some weed spraying under here just to make sure that we keep the grass low. Because, but ultimately, yes, if I could go back and do this again, I would build the panels a little bit higher, and then I would have borrowed the mate sheep to come in and so because I'm gonna fucking mow this thing all the time now. Yeah. But there's a good farmer across the road there that was like, oh shit, I should have just let him come raise his paddock from time to time, and he would have kept it down, but we didn't build the panels high enough, so the sheep will get up on them, I think. Yeah.
So just think about the finance. You're getting what finance can you get to?
So we,
absorb the-
yeah, so with
the-
farming, we've done a BNZ Green Loan or a sustainability linked loan. We can get like half a basis, 50 basis points off. So I think we're sitting at about 5.5% from memory, which is pretty decent. What I really like is the 0% loans. ASB is now offering a 0% loan to farmers. So like it's just like an economic slam dunk.
So 0% finance over what time?
I think they do it over 5 years.
Is there a bit of finance over 5 years and getting a 20% rate return? That's what you're saying.
Free solar.
Free solar.
Yeah. The bank's subsidising every farmer in New Zealand. I think that's really cool, right? Like
That's a pretty good proposition.
they're doing the right thing by that. But also the big thing that they're realising is that if you put the solar system in, like you bring down farm input costs, makes you a better customer for the bank, makes you, a better business overall. There's more money at the end of the day left over. So you become just a far better, more safe lending opportunity for a bank to continue to take money out of you for other things. Yeah.
So you've got these solar arrays here, and the other options that we've got a lot of sheds, dairy sheds,
Yep.
etc. around our region, and also around the country. I mean, is that an option as well?
I think the first thing is like the only reason I put this in the paddock is this was meant to be my daughter's pony paddock. When she was 6 years old, she loved the idea of owning ponies, and we bought this place that had a stables with it. So I was like, okay, we'll just keep this bit for the daughter's ponies. By the time she's 12 now, she doesn't want anything to do with horses or ponies. And so we had this land. I was like, well, do I plant it out in cherries? But I'd already done the numbers on the electricity by that time. I was like, no, it's actually far better to put this in solar.
You're making more money from solar than from cherries.
Totally. And then then it becomes, but the first thing is like the last thing we want to do is put this stuff in a way that's going to sacrifice farm productivity, right? So the number one place to put it, and it requires less infrastructure, is to put it on your shed roof if your shed's built and engineered to handle it. Might work out to be slightly more expensive with all the harnesses and occupational health and safety associated with getting the guys up on your roof to drill into your roof and put all the panels in and stuff like that. So ground mount's a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't. It's a little bit cheaper if you don't include the opportunity cost of what else you could do with land, right? And when you're looking at things like dairy farms, every last square inch of land is productive, and so you have to think about new ways of doing things. Sheds is obviously one way of doing it. I've seen a lot of fence line solar going up overseas because solar has become so efficient now. Like you can put it vertical.
Oh,
Right, and that will still it won't be as efficient as putting it on an angle, but it will still catch an awful lot of UV and therefore generate an awful lot of electrons. So there's things that farmers can do that are a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for, innovative to get this return. Or the other thing is, you can put them in a field and just boost them up higher. Don't know how the structure would go with very curious cows, but as far as sheep are concerned, they're not going to damage that.
We might want to put electric fence around it.
Well, that's it. You probably just put a hot wire around it and keep Daisy well away from the iron post, because you don't want them bending that and stuff. But
So you were mentioning to me earlier that there is a dairy farm up at the North Island.
Vern's the dairy farmer's name. I forgot the name of the farm offhand, but he is just up in the Wairarapa. He's got a ground mount system as well as solar on his roof, making really good money. And saving an awful lot of money in the process as well. And I've been just working with him over time. I think as far as I'm aware, he is the most electric. He's not fully electric yet. Like, we still have to figure out how to get 160 horsepower electric tractors into the country for him to be able to go fully electric. It's just really the front loader and the towing of the silage wagons requires a bigger tractor than the one that I have for my
So how much of a sheet can he run off the system at the moment?
To be honest, I don't know the exact details. I haven't looked at his numbers in great detail, but he often raves about the amount of money that he saves. So that's the first step. Whether or not it is at a point where he's got enough solar yet that he could milk his cows when there's power cuts for months, I actually don't know the answer to that yet. I suspect probably not. But I think with what we've seen happen in the Southland, we're going to start seeing more and more farmers realising that this is the way forward. If you have an irrigation pivot, especially like up in Canterbury, because it's Hampshire, with our dairy farmers up there, if you have an irrigation pivot, you have a large grid connection. Like, it just makes sense that when you're making power to run your irrigator and then you're pushing power back, and you build it big enough that during the middle of the day you can still milk the girls. I think that's a super important thing to be thinking about moving forward as we move into a period potentially with more volatile weather patterns, and potentially as we start to look at ways of generating energy in different ways. The way I talk about this energy transition is it's not just fossil fuels to electricity. It's actually also going to be the way that us as customers generate and store electricity ourselves, and take a lot more energy sovereignty back than what's happened in the market so far. So
that's part of it, isn't it? Because you've got here batteries as well, so you can store some of your own energy.
Yeah, we can store about 300 kilowatt hours, which is enough to run the orchard for a couple of days. But the thing to keep remembering about batteries is it's like the sun always comes up the following day. So even if you empty your batteries out, like 8 a.m. rolls around and the batteries start filling up again.
Sun's back up again.
So it's not a linear supply thing. Like it's kind of like the way that our hydro dams work, right? Like they start to run out and then it rains and then they, so we don't think about hydro as how much is the lake and how long does it take to empty the lake, because generally more water comes. We get into a situation with a dry year where no water comes and then we have to start burning coal and stuff. So that's a real problem. But here is a really unique example. We can almost guarantee there's energy production the following day. If it's overcast, there might be less, but you can still guarantee that something's going to get through. If it's a really, really bad day, it generates 10% of what it does on a really, really good day. But as we can see right now, like there's probably people in Southland still without power, and it's a beautiful sunny day.
Yeah, true. Now, segueing from on-farm production to residential.
Yep.
You have some interesting thoughts around that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we're at a point now where electricity in New Zealand is so expensive, and when we talk about electricity, I talk about it from the customer's perspective, which is the delivered cost of energy. So when a lot of people in the energy system they talk about the cost of generating electricity, but that's not what the customer pays. The customer pays the wholesale rate for electricity, plus they pay for all the poles and wires that connects their homes or their farms to the dams. And so that works out at the moment, it's probably sitting around about 35 cents a kilowatt hour, 40 cents a kilowatt hour for a home in New Zealand. Like it's really, really getting quite expensive, right? If you finance solar on your rooftop on your mortgage at 5.5%, it's 13 cents a kilowatt hour. Right. And so it's actually, in a way, it's cheaper to extend your mortgage than it is to continue to pay the power companies. And I just think that's a remarkable opportunity. The problem is that not everyone in New Zealand has access to mortgage finance. So what do we do about renters? What do we do about pensioners? What do we do about low income where they can't get any more of a mortgage out, or they can't get a mortgage on the property that they own? And this is why I get really excited about something called the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme. This is basically through councils allows customers to lend not on their income but on the value of their property, right? And so basically they lend money to do these energy upgrades in their home. They can electrify, really much more efficient electric machines like hot water and spatial heating through heat pumps. You can get gas cooktops out of the home because that sucks for our health, and you can put solar panels on the roof to power a lot of those machines during that time, and a battery in the garage for extra resilience. And you can finance that all over 15 to 20 years at a really low interest finance rate that ultimately is administered by the government and local government together. Right. It costs the taxpayer literally nothing, because the government will be making some money back off administering that process. It costs the ratepayer literally nothing, because the councils will be making some money back in that process. And it will ultimately save our households thousands of dollars a year. And so that's where I think that if we can get this over the line, I actually think this is probably the single biggest piece of economic legislation in quite some time. When you guys cut taxes, that's great. What we're talking about here is potentially, just putting solar on the roof. The savings from solar on a household in New Zealand, you'll pay back the capital, you'll pay back the interest, and you'll make $1,000 of additional income a year. Not of income, of savings a year, right? So it's like giving every home in New Zealand a $1,000 pay rise immediately for anyone who elects to use this system. So that's what I get really, really excited about. If you get gas out of the home, that's even more savings. We're looking at $2,000-3,000 of savings a year for households that go fully electric with solar panels on the roof.
And so where you're at with this?
Mine and your great mate Megawatts he's said publicly that he's very interested in this, which is great. There's a business case that's being developed at the moment that's obviously been reviewed by Cabinet Agri, and what we need to obviously do is get it to a point where it's absolutely bulletproof, so that when it goes to Cabinet, it's just an easy yes. And that's where it's kind of sitting at the moment. Is it an easy yes yet? I don't know. We've got a couple of things that we have to, this is the whole thing around, if it's that good, why is the private sector not doing it? You tell me, because it is that good, why is the private sector not doing it? It's because the energy companies, I don't think, are particularly interested in seeing people make their own energy. The banks aren't particularly interested in seeing another form of finance going. So I just don't think it's something that the private sector can do by themselves. I think it actually requires strong strategic leadership at Wellington and at the local government level in order to achieve this. But if we get it over the line, thousands of dollars of savings a year, plummeting emissions, way more resilience. There's not a lot of things that you can say is bad about this opportunity.
And this is good for local government health.
So the local government is ultimately the one that they will sign up to the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, and what it means is they will be the ones that will send you the bill every quarter saying this is how much money you need to pay on your finance. The finance is leveraged on your property, so that's sort of the security associated with that. But when the council is administering this, there will be obviously an administration fee associated with that for the council, so that they can employ staff to look after this, but also potentially it is a really big win for the ratepayer. In a world where rates continue to rise up, this is actually a really good opportunity for councils to start making some money. And there are going to be councils that are equity partners in this. There will be councils that just administer it. There's also going to be the central government, which will also be an equity partner in this. So we're not talking about free interest, we're talking about low interest. And with the rates that you guys can get for lending, like 300, 350 basis points, something like that, is probably what we're going to be able to charge the customer, where both the government and the local government still makes money along the way by providing a much longer term finance at much cheaper rates to the customer. So.
You showed me a graph earlier where just sort of the difference in the cost of solar versus other forms of energy.
Yep.
You want to talk about that?
I mean, these things here, when I bought them, were like $130 a pound. Right now they're like under $100 a pound, and that's like not that long ago. Like I only installed these 12 months ago. So this is the interesting thing, right? Like, it has never been cheaper in history to generate electricity. So why are New Zealand's power bills continuing to go up? It's because not all technology is treated fairly. We're so biased towards building big power plants and large-scale solar and wind and all of those kinds of things, and then building poles and wires, and then charging all of those poles and wires back onto the customers of New Zealand. So that's why our power bills keep going up. In a true market where everything was treated fairly, well, this is by far the cheapest option now. So why is it that we only have 3% rooftop solar penetration? Well, it's the upfront capital cost. Now, the upfront capital cost of all these other things get socialised on massively large balance sheets and show up on your power bill, and you're just paying it monthly. So if this is going to cost, a solar installation on a household is going to cost $20,000. No New Zealander has $20,000 just sitting in a bank account ready to go. So we have to finance it. But not all New Zealanders have access to finance, and we can't finance it at a rate competitive with what the big companies can do. And so that's where it gets really unfair. And so if we take a customer-centric approach to the energy system, well, then really the future energy system is probably going to be solar panels on 80% of the rooftops of New Zealand, because that's the cheapest energy the customer's going to get. Batteries for resilience, and then any future energy at the central level is there to service industry. And that's the way that I think this is going. And if we do this at scale, like this is one of the we spend $55 million a day on fossil fuels as New Zealanders. That is our current account being absolutely slaughtered. Most of that money evaporates out of mine and your wallets, and it evaporates out of our communities, and it evaporates out of our country and goes overseas to pay the fossil fuel the countries that produce fossil fuels. And so if we can hold a lot of that money in New Zealand by doing these kinds of investments, then our country just becomes way more prosperous. We have more money to invest in things. As Cameron Baggery said, our economic strategy up to this point has been selling more expensive houses to each other. This is a real productivity opportunity that I get super, super excited about.
Now, two things to come out of that, or flow on for that, is the connectivity, so the network. So do you end up having islands of energy generation? People generate themselves not connected to the network, or how does the network piece fit into
we
this?
want the network to stay. We want New Zealand's national grid to stay, because it's one of the only things that connects all our homes and businesses together, right? And the fact is that I can make really good money selling the power that I generate back to New Zealand's national grid. And those electrons flow to other houses and other businesses and all of that kind of thing, right? So we want everyone to stay connected to the grid. This is just a big opportunity to make your power bill less. So I think that's a really important thing to understand, is that we're not anti-grid at all. Probably a little bit anti-market with the way that it's set up, with the power prices continuing to rise when I really don't think they should be continuing to rise anymore. I think the incentives of our large generators are wrong. We either fix what our large generators have done, or fix what the market, so that our large generators do things differently, or we just do things differently. And I think allowing the customer to do things differently is the ultimate missing piece for, is the countermeasure for the way that the market is currently acting. And that eventually, when enough people do this, the price of power comes back down, because supply is up. Yeah, so that's sort of what I get really quite quite excited about is trying to figure out how we just empower the customer, provide the energy sovereignty, provide the finance to allow them to make a decision. You know, the chat that we were at today with Cameron Baggery, he was like, we've got to get over the self-entitlement and move back to self-responsibility. Well, self-responsibility is me going, yeah, I'll take on some debt and I'll put this in because I know it's going to save me money in the long run. The problem is all the people that would love to do that but don't necessarily have access to debt finance, that's the real problem. That's also why farmers are an amazing opportunity because they're one of the few sets of people in New Zealand that actually get finance. And they know, because they're always doing things, and they're always trying to work out whether it's cheaper to pay the finance and do the upgrade or not pay the finance. And so what you're seeing is a lot of farmers in New Zealand going, holy shit, that's 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's $1 a kilowatt hour. And if I finance that, it's still 7 cents a kilowatt hour. It's probably 4 cents if I don't finance it. So it just that's where I get really excited about the rural sector, because they're really smart, finance savvy people that understand that you can swap fuels for finance and you can save a shit ton of money from day one. Yeah, and that's the argument that is not working well with residential New Zealand at the moment, because your mum, my mum would have told us, don't go into debt. Going into debt's the worst idea. It's the way to go bankrupt.
Yeah, we experienced in the 80s.
But
seen it in New Zealand consciousness.
Exactly. But if you think about it, like paying a petrol bill every week or paying a gas bill every month, paying an electricity bill every month, that is all outgoings. Whether you're paying the bank or Meridian or Contact, whoever it might be, that's all outgoings. But if the bank cost of doing this is cheaper than the bill from Meridian or Genesis or Mercury, well then it's actually the right financial decision to be making. But we're not necessarily making that at the moment because we'd rather pay our energy bills because we're scared of debt. And so that's sort of something that we need to figure out how to change, because all that the big companies do is take debt, build shit, charge more for it. So this is
some of the banks already do have a finance available for residential, don't they?
Yeah. So it works, and it's quite good getting those 0 to 1% loans or whatever they are. The problem is this is an asset that will last for 30 years, and those bank loans last for 5 years. So you have to pay it all off in 5 years. So really what you kind of do is increase your cost of living for 5 years to pay back all the capital on this to then get the savings. And when you do finance over a much longer period of time, like 15, 20 years, well then I can put my hand on my heart and pretty much tell everyone in New Zealand that they'll save money from day one by putting a solar system in. And so that's where this is a bit different. That's where the ratepayers assistance scheme is a little bit different from traditional bank finance. But the other thing is that because it's property contingent and not income contingent, your mum and my mum, who are both pensioners, who don't have a lot of disposable income, will be able to put solar on their roofs, guaranteed on their property, right? So the property becomes collateral essentially, but they'll save thousands of dollars a year on their energy bills. And so they'll be able to pay back the interest through the savings, and that's how you get the shit for free essentially.
Now the base load question.
Yep.
So when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow.
Yep.
You need base load.
Yeah. So we split the electricity system into 4 key jobs. There's actually probably, I think, 6 jobs now. The 5th being resilience and the 6th being emissions. But we don't really talk about those. So let's park those to one side. So there's 4 jobs, right? The first one is, what is the minimum amount of energy that we need at any one point in time to run New Zealand's electricity system? So on the quietest day, do you know what the quietest day is in New Zealand for electricity consumption?
No.
Boxing Day. So it's the day after
Never go
we've had the
shopping.
family round. We're all hungover. We're all lying in bed. We're not doing anything.
Lying on the beach, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe we're going shopping. But yeah, that's the thing. So Boxing Day, and so that's like the lower. And so job 1 is really about how do we make sure we have enough power to cover the minimum consumption requirements, right? And we already do a very, very good job of that with our hydro scheme in New Zealand. It's absolutely brilliant. There's not a lot of further investment we need to do in that regard to handle job 1, and adding more renewables to the network, whether it's farm solar, residential solar, whether it's a utility scale solar, whether it's wind. Like job 1's fairly under control. Then you've got job 2, and job 2 is the opposite end of the spectrum, which is that cold, still winter of night in the middle of winter when everyone has got everything on all at once, right? And that is a much, much harder thing to solve, because that's when we get into the situation called peaking, and we need to have on-demand generation available, because one thing that is super important is that in order to run a functional economy, when you flick that switch, that light has to come on. So we need to acknowledge that that is a truly important part of our economy, that we require a stable energy system. And so how do you do that? Well, this is where we have these things called peakers. Now, we had gas peakers. Problem is, we're kind of running out of gas, right? And so that's causing massive issues because the price of gas has gone up massively. We have Huntley, which is coal peaking, which is okay as well in a way, because the one great thing about coal, and there's a lot of bad things about coal, but the one advantage of coal is doesn't cost a lot of money to store a giant pile of coal. The problem with gas peakers is it costs a lot of infrastructure to store gas, right? So that's the problem there. Then you've got another thing called diesel peakers. And so really what I think we should be doing, we're talking here about like the final 5% of New Zealand's energy system, which is the most expensive. Now, the previous government talked about we want 100% renewable grid. And I don't think that was a smart policy, because ultimately what it does is the most expensive bit to replace is the final 5%, right? But we actually don't need 100% renewable grid. We need a 200% renewable grid if we're going to take advantage of all of the savings potential from converting over from fossil fuels to electricity. And so if we need a 200% renewable grid, then how do we go about achieving that? Well, that basically means more and more generation centrally, and more generation and storage at the customer level as well. But ultimately, I think what your Electrify NZ policy, I think, is quite a good policy, in that we're talking about doubling the amount of renewable energy on New Zealand's energy system. Yeah. The problem is the gentailers actually haven't listened to that, and nothing's happening, right? So we're not doubling the amount of renewable energy. This is where the customer comes in, because the customer will double renewable energy on New Zealand's electricity system. But we're still going to need, I think, some sort of fossil fuels to continue to run, to continue to satisfy job 2. I think that the cheapest option for the customer is probably diesel peakers, and the reason is we import lots of diesel anyway. We import it into Marsden Point. Running peakers at Marsden Point ultimately is more expensive per unit of electricity compared to liquefied natural gas or something like that. You actually don't have to run it very often. We only actually have to run them for a very small period of time in the winter when we're not generating enough energy. Then you've got job 3, which is the dry year, which is when our dams, our storage lakes, our 3 major storage lakes, our Taupo, Pukaki, and Tekapō, and we've got another small one up at Hawea. There's a few other smaller lakes around, but those 3 lakes hold about 5 to 6 weeks worth of water, or 5 to 6 weeks worth of electricity. And that's fine, it's like our giant battery. It's probably New Zealand's greatest economic strength. We have these amazing batteries. The problem is that when it doesn't rain, you start to deplete those batteries over a period of time, right? And in particular, what we call a dry year or a dry winter, is that the rain predominantly means snow. And so, exactly right. And so then that water doesn't come off the mountains for months after it's fallen. So you get into this situation where you're running out of water, and then to satisfy job 1, we then need to start burning coal at Huntley to keep the lights on. Now that's where I'm going. Solar is when I say solar is the solution, it's not the only solution, but it will definitely do a massive contribution to this, because ultimately we will be able to hold on to the water into the dams for significantly longer if we're generating electricity locally. Now that could be at a utility scale solar farm, but I think most of the solar generation in New Zealand is going to come from the customers in New Zealand, because that's where the true savings opportunity is. So a 9 kilowatt system in a dry year on a rooftop in New Zealand will generate the same amount of electricity as 1 tonne of coal. So a 9 kilowatt system in the middle of winter on a typical home in New Zealand will generate the same amount of energy as burning 1 tonne of coal at home. Right? We've got 2 million homes, whack a 9 kilowatt system on there, you start to see actually, well, there's a potential to massively reduce the amount of coal we need to consume during a dry year just by doing solar with hydro as our battery. Right, so that's the other one there, and then job 4 gets into talking about, well, what happens at the low voltage local networks of New Zealand when we've got plenty of generation going on and everything's fine, but it's particularly cold in this region of New Zealand, and all of a sudden we don't have the poles and wires that are big enough to supply everyone who needs it, and that's where batteries in homes are hugely significantly important. The one thing I didn't mention about job 2 is my farm right now, it has got 300 kilowatt hours with batteries. When New Zealand really needs it, I get a signal from my local utility company, Aurora, and I power 25 homes off my batteries going straight out. I'm pushing power straight out to the grid. So batteries in homes and batteries on farms is one of the ways to help with job 2. It's also a fantastic way to help with job 4, which is how do we look after all of the local congestion that goes on where the pipes or poles and wires aren't big enough to shift all the electrons around that grid. And also that can help with frequencies as well, which is getting really technical now, but that is, the grid has to run at particular frequencies, otherwise things start to go very wrong very, very quickly. And having grid forming inverters and batteries means that I can contribute to making sure those frequencies are stabilized and the grid stays up. So that's only electrical engineers will understand that, but those are the four key things. So there's a lot of nuance, there's no perfect answer, but I am convinced from the economics of all of this that solar will play a massive role, and then when I talk about solar, customer solar will play an absolutely massive role in New Zealand's future energy system, and we need to be preparing for that. We need to be making sure that ultimately we improve our resilience, we lower the cost for farm, we lower the cost for residential as much as we possibly can. Ultimately, my thinking right now is how do we build the most prosperous country in New Zealand that is with the cheapest and most renewable energy system in the world, and that is totally achievable if we get strategic about it. By getting strategic about it, we require bravery of Wellington, which actually means we have to start thinking about the energy system servicing the customers of New Zealand and not bank balances of the Gentiles. And that is the big shift that we need to make in a very, very short period of time to make sure that ultimately we lock it without this.
And just on that, the customer putting energy back to the grid, we can see there's a lot of change at the moment.
Oh, so this.
Your
government has to be massively commended for some of the steps that have been taken to make this a lot easier. One of the big things, probably the biggest thing of all, has been the change of the voltage standard in New Zealand, which means we've seen now some of the utility companies lift restriction on export from 5 kilowatts to 10 kilowatts. That was a really simple change that people have been asking for decades. That has finally come through, thanks to Megawatts and the national team there. There's been all sorts of things done recently around lowering the tax or making things tax-free for exporting back to the grid. There's been a lot of work put into solar on farms and helping farmers who are going to make a massive contribution to New Zealand's electricity system to be a part of this. We've seen a lot of the private sector coming together as well. There has been a lot of really good things that have happened really, really recently, and that's setting us up for, I think, a really, really bright future. The next thing is how do we scale this beyond, like we categorize people into 4 categories. The early adopters, who are the ones that have the extra energy to go the extra mile to deal with all the shit to get the thing done. I'm one of them, right? I have to deal with council, I have to deal with my EDB, I have to deal with the retailers, I have to deal with the metering. It's a fucking pain in the ass.
A whole lot of complexity.
A whole lot of complexity, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the bulk of New Zealanders are what we call frustrated enthusiasts, which kind of understand that this is a good idea. Upfront capital cost is a problem for them, and they can't be fighting with their council and their EDB to get these sorts of things done. Then you've got the ones that need more knowledge, and that's quite simply they're open to new ideas, but they don't realise yet how much cheaper this energy source is than a diesel generator or whatever it might be. And then you've got your naysayers. And about 1 in 5 New Zealanders is what we class as a naysayer. They're just like, fold their arms, frown, and be like, no, don't believe you. That's fine. We don't they all come on the journey at some point. We don't need to win.
And it's a choice, right?
We live in a free country where ultimately your choice needs to be preserved. And I'm a big believer of that. Like if you are a V8 car enthusiast, please don't give up your V8, right? Because you love it. Like that's something that, like my neighbour next door, right? He loves his tractor more than anything. So me convincing him to give up his tractor, it's just not going to happen, right? So we don't need to, but he doesn't love his gas hot water system, right? And and when it comes
to he probably likes paying less for energy.
Exactly, and when it comes to driving your car around the race course down there at Highlands, go for gold. But it's the car that you're driving down there is not your fucking weekly commute, is it? So there's compromises that can be made here to bring people on the journey. I think like one of the biggest problems with sustainability and energy and climate and all those things is we've made enemies out of regular people who are just doing what they love. And we've got to stop this argument being one of negativity and pointing fingers at everybody else and just like have a colder shower and the world is slightly as fucked is not a good selling marketing thing.
No, not particularly.
But drive like, hey, you should hop in an electric vehicle because it goes from 0 to 100 in fucking 4 seconds and it's the best drive you're ever going to have. And there is actually a really bright future ahead of us if we start adopting this technology. If we start running off New Zealand-made energy rather than overseas-made energy, there's a really bright economy ahead of us. And like New Zealand spends a lot of time, I think, arguing about things that, in actual fact, if we just looked at what the opportunity is in front of us and we all went for that North Star, which is a highly renewable, incredibly cheap energy system, that is ultimately, I think, the ticket to everything, because industry spawns around that, and livelihood, like cost of living goes down as a result of that. Emissions go down as a result of that. Like everybody wants.
even length of lifespan, comes out of the cost of energy fundamentally.
Precisely.
So quality of life.
Quality of
Yeah.
everything
Cost of
improves.
energy has an impact.
I mean,
Pretty much everything else.
we have this massive problem with energy hardship in this country. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 100,000 people had to take out loans last year to pay their energy bills. It's like a ridiculous. It's just so flawed. Because if we put solar panels on their roofs, it would pay for it with the savings. So this is what we've got to start thinking about. New Zealand's most wicked problem is not getting people who can afford the finance or can afford to do this. That's just an education base, and that's what I'm quite good at doing. As I go around New Zealand telling middle class New Zealand this is a bloody good idea. New Zealand's wicked problem is how do we do this for all of those that can't and not in a position to do it. Because at the moment, New Zealand's biggest problem is only those that can afford to save can save. And that's what we've got to change. And that's where things like the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, I think, become so incredibly important. We've still got a lot of work to do to figure out how we can incentivise landlords properly to do this. Landlord spends the money, the tenant gets the reward with cheaper bills. But ultimately, I think landlord or tenant, or you and I can all agree that a tenant paying less money for power bills is a good thing.
100%.
So how do we do that? I mean, if I was to throw a couple of policy ideas at you right now, it would be warmer Kiwi homes need to include solar and batteries from a resilience perspective, and it has to be extended to rental companies, because that is the way that we can incentivise landlords to start actually doing these upgrades to the homes that they don't really get any financial benefit from doing, but they have to spend money on. If there's a subsidy involved, that would work really well. The other big thing would be how do you measure the cost of living in a home? And I think a fully electric home with solar panels on the roof is far cheaper to live in than a gas home with no solar panels. And so what is the thing that we can do to make sure every rental property listing or every property listing on Trade Me has a estimated cost of living certificate associated with it, which is what is to live a standard Kiwi lifestyle, how much is it going to cost in this home? And that way we can start to actually get these upgrades being reflected in the values of the properties, or how much rent is being charged on that property, which is how you get money back from the landlord. There's no reason that if we just change things slightly, everyone can win in these scenarios. But ultimately at the moment, no one buys a house because people do buy houses because they're electric, sorry. But no one looks at the property. There's no way to tell, is this property fully electric? Is this property cheap? Is it well insulated? Is it got solar panels on the roof? Is the bills of the living in this household literally $0 a year? Or is it $4,000 a year? Does it have the ability for me to plug in my electric car?
Because you get into cars now, you get a sort of an estimate of what's the cost to run the car.
Correct.
Per annum.
And so the typical home of mum and dad and two children living in that home, we know how much hot water they're going to use. We know all the starter. We know how much hot water they're going to use. We know how much it costs to heat their home, different per region, but we can figure all that nuance out. We know how much they travel around New Zealand. So all of these kinds of things, we know what the solar panel system will do to their household savings. So we should be able to work out really easily. That home costs $0 to live in a year. That home costs $5,000 to live in a year. And that home's electric but not very well insulated. So it's probably going to cost you $2,000 a year. And that is kind of where I think we need to be moving forward, which is, I don't think something that's going to be politically unappealing to either side of politics. We just got to get something actually.
Cheers, Mike. It's been a very great discussion.
Yeah, mate.
And the sun's been shining the whole time, generating energy,
Generating
for you and for the grid.
Actually, one of the reasons I went down this path first off is I was fixing an old diesel pump on my property, and I got massively sunburnt in the Central Otago sun. And that's when it all clicked. I was like, maybe this is a good idea. I didn't put any sunblock on my ears actually.
Instead of burning my skin, I can generate.
You and I get a good Central Otago tan right now. Yeah.